What's going on, everyone? This is Kazak here, and today I'm going to rank every single mainline Dynasty Warriors game from the absolute worst to the absolute best. If it wasn't obvious already, the Dynasty Warriors series is one of my favorite video game franchises of all times. And while some people will rag on these games for being overly repetitive button masters, there's a great level of enjoyment that I get from not only experiencing the loose history of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms story in the games, but simply picking a cool looking character with a cool looking weapon and beating the crap out of thousands of soldiers in my way offers such a satisfying feeling. The best way I can describe this is that the games are like great comfort games that I can just pick up and play without having a care in the world. It's a very unique sense of fun that I get from Muso games in general, and now that Dynasty Warriors Origins has been released, attracting a new wave of players and even fans, it gives me hope that more people will start to appreciate these games more than ever, which is why I'm going to give you guys my honest rankings of each and every entry of the series, hopefully giving you guys some ideas to try out some of these games. With that said, let's get to the list. Starting off at the absolute bottom of the barrel, we have Dynasty Warriors 9. Now, I can easily just stop here and say that this game is hot garbage and move on to the next title. I mean, what else can I truly say about this game that hasn't been said before at this point? Okay. I'll play along. Needless to say, it's been heavily abused, bashed, mocked, and ridiculed by a lot of people on the internet. This was the game that turned the entire franchise into the laughingstock at the gaming circle when it initially came out. Even I couldn't defend this game because what they did with 9 was absolutely inexcusable. It had an abysmal performance that bogged down the experience. There was a massive amount of clone characters that had the same weapon slash movesets. Even some characters like Sun Tzu, Wang Yi, Shang Bao, and Lu Lang Chi lost their original weapons in this game. Granted, some of these would return, but in the form of DLC content. Ugh, good grief. And if that wasn't bad enough, the voice direction here is absolutely terrible. It's not even funny bad like in Dynasty Warriors 3, it just feels flat and boring. It's like you're going to your typical 9 to 5 job on a Monday kind of bad. Then, the absolute worst aspect of this game is the open world. Yes, this was the first Dynasty Warriors game to go open world. Now, on paper, this sounds like a cool idea. Being able to play as your favorite warriors, traveling around, interacting with various officers should sound like an absolute blast, but in execution, it was poorly handled. Outside of the swarm of enemies, everything is just so barren with very little things to do. Sure, you have stuff like fishing, crafting, and side quests, but they're menial tasks that doesn't add much value to the already lackluster experience. Even the gameplay doesn't feel fun to play. It's way too floaty and the enemies can feel like health sponges. The graphics also doesn't look good either. Everything looks so unpolished and dry looking, even with the brighter colors in some areas. The only thing I can give the game some props for is the cool looking character designs and the soundtrack, which is still pretty good. Honestly, this was the game that almost made me lose faith in the series. A game that was supposed to be a revitalization ended up tarnishing the Dynasty Warriors name, and unfortunately, it will forever remain as a dark reminder of the franchise at its absolute worst. Moving on, we have the original Dynasty Warriors. Now, I was debating whether or not to include this game here because it's technically not a Muso game. However, it is the game that kickstarted this franchise, so I guess it's only fair to include it. Believe it or not, this entry was a weapon-based fighting game on the PlayStation, similar to Soul Blade, which would eventually become Soul Calibur. It also has very early looking CGI cutscenes that were quite interesting to say the least. The game is obviously based off of the Three Kingdoms, and while there's no real story to speak of in the game itself, there's still a lot of background information regarding the characters, events, and battles inside the instruction manual. When it comes to the gameplay, it is fun, but a bit clunky, and it's definitely not comparable to the likes of Tekken 3, Rival Schools, or even Street Fighter EX. However, I can appreciate the sheer amount of detail Koei implemented in the game, and there's a weird 90s charm about this entry that I like. Outside of that though, I don't have too much to say about this game. It's mainly interesting to experience the game from a historical gaming perspective, I guess, but that's pretty much it. Here we have the grandfather of all Muso games, Dynasty Warriors 2. This is the main game that started it all. The large battlefield stages, a wide variety of different characters to play as from each of the Three Kingdoms, and creating a story mode that recaps the important events of the Yellow Turban Rebellion to the climactic battle of the Wujiang Plains between Shu and Wei. For its time, Dynasty Warriors 2 can be described as a 3D hack and slash that had a simple formula, but it was so unique that there really wasn't anything like it. So, does the game still hold up by today's standards? Well, kinda, but not really. Okay, well, here's the thing. Dynasty Warriors 2 is a very important entry. This game isn't without its flaws though. For starters, the characters that you start off with are pretty damn weak, meaning that even simple things like fighting officers can be a massive challenge. If that wasn't bad enough, enemies can straight up just get a random buff by knocking them down, some of which can get their whole entire health back for no reason. The game basically punishes you for kicking their asses, and it's such a weird design choice. The only way to circumvent this is by never finishing your combos, which essentially forces you to beat the officers like this, and it can be absolutely tiring, especially since a lot of the missions can take a long time to complete. I pretty much get tired out just by playing one mission. It also doesn't help that this game doesn't have multiplayer. Yeah, believe it or not, this is the only game in the series that doesn't have a multiplayer, weirdly enough. Dynasty Warriors 2 is undoubtedly one of the most difficult games in the series just for these reasons alone. Overall, I don't want to say that the game itself is bad because it isn't, and I think that there's still a lot of fun to be had with this entry. Heck, I still had a good time with this game in spite of my critiques for it, but its archaic design choices might make it a bit difficult for other fans to enjoy this one. Next up, we have the most controversial game in the series. This entry was meant to be the big shakeup that would improve upon other entries and reinvent the formula after hearing the constant criticisms of previous entries feeling too samey. However, this wasn't the case. Dynasty Warriors 6 was met with lukewarm reception from critics, and fans were not happy with the changes made. First off, let's talk about clones. Unfortunately, some characters in this game have lost their original movesets and were replaced with generic weapons. Only characters who have a story mode gets to keep their original movesets. Now, to be fair, clones in Dynasty Warriors games wasn't exactly new at the time, but Dynasty Warriors 3, 4, and 5 improved on giving characters unique movesets that it wasn't really much of an issue. So for Dynasty Warriors 6 to take 2 steps backwards on this is inexcusable. To make it worse, the game removed characters such as Yang Wei, Dao Xiao, Shen Kai, Peng De, and Zhu Rong. Not only do we get a much smaller roster compared to other games, we basically get no new characters at all. Yeah, this was definitely not a good call to make. Gameplay wise, it feels like your typical Dynasty Warriors game. Only except it feels worse. If you thought previous games felt repetitive, then oh boy, you have not played Dynasty Warriors 6. And it's all thanks to the Renbu system. The best way I could try to summarize this mechanic is that you have a meter that builds up as you attack enemies, and the more you build it up, the more your combos are extended for your character, which in concept doesn't sound completely bad, but in execution, it just feels way too repetitive and tedious to perform anything outside of your light attack combos. In my opinion, it's a mechanic that they try way too hard to make different, and as a result, it bogs down the game experience. To give the game some credit though, visually it looks good, even by today's standards, and the soundtrack is also pretty damn good too. Overall, Dynasty Warriors 6 is a game that misses the mark in many areas, but at the same time, you could maybe find some value in it if you look hard enough. Alright, now we're starting to work our way up to the better half of the series. In this spot we have Dynasty Warriors 7. After the reception of 6, Koei took the time to reevaluate some of its missteps and put more focus on fixing the problems from the previous entry. The biggest appeal with this game is its story campaign, and it's no exaggeration when I say that 7 has the best story presentation in the entire series. In past games, the stories always felt more like an afterthought. While it was cool learning about the history about certain characters and events, the games never really put enough effort to go further than what was already established. It just gave context as to why you were fighting, and that's pretty much it. However, in 7, the game puts you in the shoes of these many different characters, and you can't help but get invested into the struggles and development that each of these kingdoms go through in their respective routes. You want to keep going, and it makes the battles that you participate in have more of an impact behind them. Granted, the story isn't entirely perfect, nor would I say it's a masterpiece, but it's damn entertaining and it does just enough to keep you interested. Gameplay wise, the game reverts back to the traditional combo strings like in past games, which feels refreshing and fun. There's also additional 2 new Muso attacks added for each character, give them even more options. Characters can also use 2 weapons in battle. You can choose whatever weapons you want for the character regardless of how silly it may look on other characters. This also allows you to pick any moveset you're choosing, but unfortunately this does come at the cost of having cloned movesets. The game also has no free mode, and in place of it, it's conquest mode. In it, you basically do small time battles or challenges, and it does get kind of boring after a while. To add salt to the wound, you can't do local multiplayer on story mode, which absolutely sucks. However, these issues aren't enough to bog down the overall experience. Dynasty Warriors 7 is a good title that I can easily recommend playing if you're just looking for a fun story experience. Here we have Dynasty Warriors 8. Now, this entry doesn't drastically change a whole lot from Dynasty Warriors 7, but the changes are significant enough to place it in a higher spot. The gameplay has gotten some slight changes, like each character having their own unique weapons and movesets, so while we still have sub-weapons, each character feels unique and the gameplay stays fresh. Added on to that, weapons now have different affinities: man, earth, and heaven. It's basically a rock, paper, scissors mechanic where you can exploit officers' weaknesses. However, since you can only carry 2 weapons, that means it's necessary to have 2 different affinities for each one. It's a decent mechanic that gives a little bit more thought to what you should bring into battle. When it comes to the story mode, it's not as great as Dynasty Warriors 7. It basically summarizes a lot of story events that it doesn't give too much room to become invested into the narrative. However, the best part of the story mode is the hypotheticals. These are what-if story routes that changes the battles when you complete all the star objectives. This adds a lot of replayability to the story mode, and each faction has one. Hell, in the Extreme Legends version, Lu Bu gets his own story mode and what-if story alongside new characters to accompany him like Shen Gong and Lu Lingqi, the daughter of Lu Bu. On top of that, a new mode called Ambition Mode was added in. It's similar to the Conquest mode from Dynasty Warriors 7, except it's slightly better. You basically get to build your camp and participate in smaller battles to get fame, materials, and characters to help add new facilities to the camp. There's also different challenge modes that are just fun distractions if you don't feel like doing the main modes. Overall, Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends feels like a complete package that offers a crap ton of fun content to play, and some could argue that this is the definitive modern Dynasty Warriors experience, which is a statement that I can fully agree with. If you want a fun, easily accessible Dynasty Warriors game to pick up and play, Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends Complete Edition is definitely the game for you. Up next, we have Dynasty Warriors 5, an absolutely solid title that has a great amount of fun content to explore and play. While the game is not quite as story heavy as Dynasty Warriors 7, the game does just enough to give some characters some time to shine, even if it's for minor roles. In this game, characters get to have their own Muso stories that, while aren't super in-depth, shows a bit of the characters' personalities and perspectives on certain events. Some characters even get some fun what-if missions. In the Extreme Legends version, there's also Destiny mode, where you can create your own character and go through your own mini-story while building up your character from being an absolute weakling to a strong officer. It's a fun mode that gives the game more replayability. As far as gameplay goes, not much has changed from previous entries, but it does make minor additions such as weapon weight, which affects the feel of your weapons. Light weapons are faster but have weaker damage, medium weapons are basically just the standard feel, and heavier weapons give better damage, but the attacks are slower as a result. You also get a new Muso Rage ability, which is obtained once you get the gold medallion next to your character's icon, and it makes your attack/Muso much stronger. Some characters even get some slight updates to their attacks and combos as well. While Dynasty Warriors 5 is not as innovative as other games in this list, the game is still incredibly fun to play, and it doesn't go out of its way to fix what isn't broken. Now, when it comes to Dynasty Warriors games, Dynasty Warriors 4 is one of the games I have invested so many hours into. The combat has been refined as you're able to perform normal and charge attacks seamlessly together, and each of the charge attacks have their own unique advantages in certain situations. Weapons are also handled differently this time around, where instead of finding weapons on the map, you level them up after clearing each stage. Personally, I prefer exploring and unlocking weapons, but it does make the weapon system feel more streamlined than most games in the series. One really cool feature that was introduced in Dynasty Warriors 4 is duels. Sometimes in battles, you'll encounter important officers that will challenge you to a one-on-one duel, and you have the choice to accept or decline the match. If you accept, you'll immediately go straight to the battle with the officer in a closed-off arena with no items or allies to help you. If you lose the match, then it's game over, but if you win, you get experience and your team gets a morale boost. This is such an awesome mechanic because of how it makes the battles feel more intense and plays into the heavy risk or reward situation. I'm seriously glad that Dynasty Warriors Origins brought this system back. Also, this game has the most kick-ass soundtrack I've heard in a Dynasty Warriors game, and it surprised me that people don't talk about it more. Granted, all the games have amazing music, but this game has some incredibly raw, blood-pumping tracks. I mean, come on, just listen to this. Now, if this doesn't make you want to march into the battlefield, then I don't know what will. Just like with other games, 4 has a story mode that focuses on the 3 kingdoms, including an additional story mode for Lu Bu in the Extreme Legends version. Depending on the missions you pick and complete, some new maps will open up leading to the slight changes in the story, but nothing drastic. It's pretty simple compared to other games in the series that would do more with it. Dynasty Warriors 4 also introduces the Empires game, which mixes some strategy role-playing elements alongside the hack-and-slash combat. Needless to say, Dynasty Warriors 4 is such a blast to play and experience. It's undoubtedly one of my personal favorite Dynasty Warriors games of all times. However, there is one more game that does slightly top this one for me. Finally, at the top of the list, we have Dynasty Warriors 3, and to be honest, it was a hard toss-up between this and Dynasty Warriors 4. But ultimately, I decided to pick this. Now, is this a biased pick? It kinda is, but you know what? This is my rankings, and I don't care. Just like with 4, I spent a large amount of time on this game. I remember the many countless school nights playing this game with my brother, trying to unlock all the weapons for the characters, and messing around in the versus mode. This was the game that truly solidified the love I have for this series, and it made me into a longtime fan. As a game, Dynasty Warriors 3 improves upon so many things from 2, to make it to a much fun experience. Notably, officers don't randomly get health by knockdown. The game gives you a sign whenever an officer is healing or giving a buff to themselves, so you have a chance to disrupt them. The game's overall difficulty feels slightly balanced this time, with a great sense of challenge, while not being as overwhelming as it was in Dynasty Warriors 2, but the game can still get pretty tough at times, I will admit. This game also features full-on voice acting for the first time, and let's just say it's something that I truly cherish to this very day.
Feel the power of my magic!
When it comes to the story mode, every character has their own story, and you even get some fun battle cutscenes depending on the character you pick. However, the game's overall story presentation is certainly not as good as other games in the series, but it's serviceable. Dynasty Warriors 3 also fleshes out the combat with unique weapons, giving characters more attacks and combos to work with. You can also add in items to give your characters pretty useful buffs, and bodyguards that can be added to your team. This is also the very first game to have a Extreme Legends version that adds more weapons, maps, and more what-if scenarios, and even a dedicated story mode for, of course, the one and only Lu Bu. This combined with the vanilla game makes the overall experience feel even better, and has enough replayability to keep you engaged. While the game might feel slightly dated to some, it doesn't hold this game back from being the best Dynasty Warriors game that I've played, and it's a game that I can always go back to and play at any point in time. Which is why, for me, Dynasty Warriors 3 is the absolute best of the series. So, there you have it. This is my complete ranking of each mainline game in the Dynasty Warriors franchise. Thinking about each of these games' placement wasn't exactly easy, because they all have some sort of value that other people will appreciate and love. Well, except for Dynasty Warriors 9. But no, in all seriousness, this is a series I have a lot of love for, and with the success of Dynasty Warriors Origins, I can't wait to see what a potential Dynasty Warriors 10 could have in store for us at some point in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. With that said, this is your boy Kazak, and I thank you guys for watching.